there's a really interesting inflection point where folks start asking themselves, wait a minute, so is it really going to be 20% online penetration in e-commerce for groceries? Or maybe it's going to be 50%. And if it's 50%, it's going to stay 50%. Maybe it's going to be 80%.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Opwest Labs, Turing, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. I am so incredibly excited for this episode. I've been following this company for so long. I actually visited their offices a couple times, and really what they're doing is just revolutionary, and we're just gonna continue hearing about them for so long. Meet Elram Goren, the co-founder and CEO of Fabric, the leader in automated micro-fulfillment centers. Fabric partners with grocers and retailers to transform underutilized space into robotics-powered warehouses that fulfill online orders in under 5 minutes. He has led the company from its inception in 2015 through its first deployments and now is at the helm of its rapidly scaling operations. Before co-founding Fabric, Elram served as a major in the Israel Defense Forces, managing R&D teams and multidisciplinary operations in the Intelligence Technology Unit. Elram holds a Bachelor of Science in Physics and Electrical Engineering from the Technion Israel Institute of Technology and an MBA from Tel Aviv University. Elram Goren, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Fabric, one of my favorite companies in the world, I swear to God. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having us. And thank you for having me.
I've been following for so long. Talking for many times with Dror Berman, one of the investors, and visiting the offices and thinking critically about how Fabric is changing the way that we think about fulfillment and micro-fulfillment and robotics and the future of warehouses. And it's really exciting. I'm already scared that I'm not going to get through all the things I want to talk about in these 20 minutes. So Elram, very briefly, before we get to talk about micro-fulfillment, tell me about yourself. How do you find yourself the co-founder and CEO of a robotics company?
Well, so in my background, I'm actually trained I studied electrical engineering and physics back in Israel, here at Carnegie Mellon, here in the U.S. And after school, I joined the IDF, spent there about 10 years in one of the tech units there. And that was before we started what was then called Common Sense Robotics, and today Fabric. So that's kind of, in short, my background. So obviously from the tech side, but in time we kind of fell in love with this field we're in, and looking forward to spending some time on that with you today.
So, when I think of micro-fulfillment and the problems that we're facing with warehouses, I think of Costco, I think of Walmart, of Amazon. I'm thinking of, huge populations that need solutions. And here in Israel, we have one of the most innovative companies in the field. What makes you think of micro-fulfillment as a problem that is worth tackling from where we are?
Well, I think that's a great question. So you mentioned a few things in kind of the last minute or two, and one was robotics, and the other was, warehousing and supply chains and things like that. But for us, as founders, we actually did not come from retail, and we didn't come from supply chain, and we didn't come from logistics. So we had no idea about the depth and complexities of some of the problems that we would eventually face. And so the way we were thinking about this is actually from a consumer standpoint. So Fabric was born from a consumer need, basically to get your groceries faster and cheaper than going to the supermarket. That's how we started. And that's what we wanted to solve, and that's what we set out to do. In time, that evolved into, hey, how do I create the tools and services that would allow my favorite brands or retailers to offer me as a consumer these types of on-demand experiences, and why is it that they can't offer that today? And that's exactly what Fabric is doing today. So Fabric was born from a consumer mindset of that's the type of experience that we would want to have as consumers. but at the same time, we looked at the industry and said, okay, so what would it take for those businesses to offer those types of experiences? And mainly, why is it that they can't or won't do that today? And solving those problems, those challenges is what we do today. And that's how micro-fulfillment was born, right? So everything you're going to see in Fabric, whether it's, the algo or the data or the software or the robots or the real estate, it all comes down to how do we get to a solution that allows those businesses to create those experiences to the consumers who, at the end of the day, are you and me, right?
Amazing. And so take me a little bit back in 30,000 feet in the air. Why can't our favorite brands give us the on-demand experience that we really, really want? It's 2021.
Right. So the answer is that they can, but they can't do it while running a sustainable business. And that's something that some companies can afford to do, meaning to lose money on their business, on every order, and some businesses can't. And in time, once you scale, it's becoming more and more challenging to do that because you're literally losing more and more money as you grow your business. And that's not a great business model. And so the reason they can't do that isn't because, there isn't the Instacart or the Postmates or, whatever platform that's already available today to make that happen. The reason is that at the end of the day, retailers and brands need to choose between an on-demand experience that will allow them to compete and a kind of a negative or an unsustainable unit economics type of model, or not being able to compete and running their existing business model. And what we're here to do is basically to combine the best of both worlds. And more than happy, obviously, to get into the details of why that combination is not available today. And at the heart of it is that in order to allow for speed, you really need proximity, right? You really need to be close to your end customers, and I think that's almost straightforward. It's not always straightforward, but let's assume we're accepting that assumption. At the same time, the closer you get to your customers, it is actually more and more challenging to run an efficient business, because everything that we know or that the industry learned about supply chains is that the more you consolidate, right, the more you make your operations more centralized, that's how to drive more efficiency. So if you're starting from an operation like online groceries in 2015, 2016, all the way to today, or general e-commerce for that matter, going closer only makes the situation worse from a unit economics perspective.
Interesting.
And at the same time, the starting point for a lot of these businesses is that they're already losing on their e-commerce business. And that's especially true for online groceries. So when we came and said, you actually need to go against economies of scale, for very good reasons, a lot of people laughed because it doesn't really make sense. The only way it does make sense is if you're able to inject a new type of model, a new architecture, or a new stack of tech that allows that to make sense. What we're effectively today doing is kind of changing the game from a game of economies of scale to a game of economies of density. And once you have that density, and that's already available in online groceries, for example, and we're seeing that in health and beauty as well. Once you have that, it actually does make sense. And that's what we're seeing in Israel with Superfarm, who were just announced an extension of the operation to kind of to cover their entire business, their e-commerce business, and that's what we're seeing here in the U.S. as well.
Incredible. And how do robots play a part in this? How does deep technology impact the way that you're able to supply this micro fulfillment?
Right. No, that's a great question. So let's take one step back and say, okay, so you need to get closer, but you also need to be a lot more efficient. So how do you do that? So you need to be able to utilize low-cost real estate. You need to be able to generate a lot of throughput in small footprints. And you need to be able to be much more efficient in terms of your operating costs for this to make sense. As it happens, robots are really good in two things. They're really good in being efficient in space if you design it the right way. And so if you enter one of our facilities, you would notice very, very early on that it's basically a 3D cube where we store things. And so we can shrink the size of the facility quite significantly and actually increase the throughput per square footage or per square meter, which is a key metric for the business. And at the same time, as it happens, robots drive labor efficiency, right? So if you're able to transition from an operation that's very labor intensive to one where people still are an important piece of the operation, but they're really focused on the things that people are very good at, and most of the work is being done by robots, then you're able to create that arbitrage as well. And the combination of those two basically allows us to create this new operating point in the P&L of the business that we're serving that allows, again, to combine what we wanted in the first place, which is speed and efficiency. And that's kind of the name of the game.
Right. And so as you're building these warehouses and as you're thinking through these technologies, how do you go and explain this to the regular retailers? Is it a common sense thing for them to understand, okay, this is the natural progression of how the warehouses are going to move to, whether it's supermarket, super farm, or traditional retailers, or does this require a little bit more explainability?
Well, I wish I could tell you that the person who's speaking to you is a great speaker and a great marketer, but I'm not gonna choose that path because I'm not sure that's necessarily the case here. I think that it's a combination of three things. It's a combination, obviously, of vision and kind of a vision that actually makes sense, at least given certain circumstances. It's a combination of early adopters that are visionaries. So I will tell you right now, if we went with, everything that we have right now, which is a lot more than we had 5 years ago, and we would pitch this in 2016, most retailers would not buy it.
Interesting.
Because there are certain companies, I'm not sure, we're definitely not the only ones, but I don't think there are a lot of these companies that undermine some very basic assumptions on how entire industries work. I think, Tesla is a good example for that, and SpaceX is definitely a good example to that, and I'm definitely not putting us in the same league, but conceptually, if you're going to go and tell retailers that everything that they've thought of in terms of consolidation is actually the wrong direction because consumers are going for on demand and technology will allow that to be sustainable, you shouldn't expect you shouldn't expect 90% conversion on day one. And the reason is that it is somewhat different. And most people, put it this differently. There are a few people that will go with that vision, and these are the early adopters, and they're the greatest champions, and that's everything that you need. Once you have those and you're successful with showing that actually works, then you're going to see more adoption. And I wouldn't even tell you that today you'll have 100% adoption rates, but it's definitely very different than what it was a few years ago. Third element is luck. So, when we started the company, I wish I could tell you that we could predict in 2016 that a year later, Amazon will acquire Whole Foods, and Walmart will acquire, a bit later would acquire Jags, and that COVID would accelerate everything that we know of in e-commerce. And I would definitely not call COVID a lucky kind of event for anyone. But from a business perspective, it definitely kind of shifted a lot of things. And so there is an element of just being in the right place at the right time. Just, you can't run away from that. You just need to be able to leverage that to accelerate the company.
100%. Now, if we're imagining the world, a few years' time, I'm always curious about the impact, and the impact has a butterfly effect, obviously, and it's not just this idea of being able of providing retailers with the ability to provide on-demand services that are actually cost effective for the business. But how does the world look in your eyes, even just in a few years? How does micro fulfillment work in the world? I'm guessing that we're going to be seeing a lot more fulfillment happening from inner cities, right? A lot of we're going to see things moving closer to the people rather than big warehouses outside.
Yeah. Well, I think that it depends on how far you want to look at, right? I think that in the retail is pretty broad, but if we focus on that for just 1 second, I think there is an opportunity here, not just to be more efficient and to create kind of more or an elevated type of experience. There is really an opportunity here to create what I'd refer to as a superior retail model, meaning you could, and I think that the world is going that direction, regardless of fabric, where you'll end up at a point where it's more convenient for a consumer to order online. It's going to be faster than going to the store. It's going to be cheaper than going to the store, and they're going to have more selection. And at the same time, and this will take time, but I'm a big believer that that's going to happen. The side of the retailer would also see a better model, meaning it's going to be more profitable for retailers to run online operations than it is to run a store. And that's not the case today. For most people, It's very far from being the case today. But I believe technology and these kind of novel operating models and architectures will allow us to get there. And once that happens, there's a really interesting inflection point where folks start asking themselves, wait a minute, so is it really going to be 20% online penetration in e-commerce for groceries? Or maybe it's going to be 50%. And if it's 50%, it's going to stay 50%. Maybe it's going to be 80%. And so I think, the next few years, I'm not sure if it's, 5 years or 10 years, things are going to get very interesting. I think the beauty of it is that it's really up to the industry, right? Because there's room to get there. It's just a function of, is tech in the mature place that it needs to be. It also is a function of, new players that are entering the market from the retailer side, like, GoPuff or Gorillas or Instacart or Uber that we're seeing, they're moving up. They're creating a big dent into more traditional industries, and I think they're gonna have even a bigger dent than what we're seeing today.
The world is changing fast. I often sit on the roof and I look at Tel Aviv and I'm looking at the thousands of scooters going by, and I'm looking at the small businesses, and I'm looking at the small supermarkets and the large supermarkets, and I can't help but get excited by the idea of how many things are going to be shifting in the next few years, just below our eyes, and I think it's honestly one of the most incredible times to think through these things, and I can't wait to see where things are headed, and I'm so honored to be speaking to one of the people that are making it happen, and are going to be a part of this incredible revolution and evolution. So Elram, toda rabba rabba. Thank you very, very much. I have a few more questions for you, very short ones, but they are important, and I want to take you back to your childhood. What fascinated you as a kid? Perhaps a passion, hobby, or your favorite subject in school?
I loved math. I still love math. I'm gonna be a bit nerdy now, but I found it to be so beautiful as the concepts there. Not trying to kind of to be too romantic about it, but I just love math, and I know that's terribly nerdy, but that's the honest truth.
I'm right there with you, and perhaps a role model or some figure of inspiration along your journey, professionally or personally, real or fake, something that inspired you as you have been on your journey.
That's a great question. I'm gonna go with there could be there is a classical answer to your question, which is probably perhaps Steve Jobs or one of those figures, and that's definitely there. I'd go with my parents.
I need a small explanation, at least something.
I think almost each and every one of us will understand. But we have two wonderful young boys, and kind of seeing them grow up and seeing how much goes into that kind of period of time, and especially their mother and the love and care that they're receiving just reflects on the earlier generation. So I'm going to go with parents, and especially moms.
I love it. And 3 words you would use to describe yourself.
That's a good one. So I haven't had a lot of we've chatted before that, so I didn't prepare an answer.
No commitments at all.
But let's go with yes, we can.
I'll take it. Okay. I'll definitely take it. Elram, thank you very, very much. This was wonderful. Thank you for the inspiration, and both in this show, but for years before that. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I can't wait to see what Fabric does to the world. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Michael.